In this section, I want to talk a little bit about how microbiology is important for food in, of course, food contamination, but also in food preparation. When we talk about food contamination, there are a number of different kinds of microbes that can be found in our food. So what I have is kind of grouped by different kinds of food and which organisms can be found in them. So even grains can be contaminated by microbes or have microbes associated with them. Generally, grains, when stored properly, like kept dry, they don't have too many microbes. But definitely if grains get wet, those microbes can grow and can cause significant infection. So some of the microbes that we find in grains are most often actually fungi, the ones that we worry about. So the two that are listed first, claviceps and aspergillus, both produce toxins that can make people sick. So it can be very dangerous to consume foods that have been contaminated with these two fungi. Saccharomyces, I don't know if we'd call it a contaminant. We actually take advantage of it to prepare food, but it is another common organism associated with grains. And it's responsible for making bread rise, for making beer and wine alcoholic, and for producing the carbonation that makes beer bubbly. Rhizopus and penicillium and other molds are responsible for food spoilage. So they're not going to necessarily make you sick because of toxin production, but they're going to make your food rot. Produce is often contaminated from a number of different sources. The microbes can come from the soil, they can come from the water used to irrigate the fields, they can come from the air, or they can come from animals that maybe walk through the fields and defecate there. You can have organisms like Pseudomonas, which can contaminate food. They can cause spoilage. You can have bacteria like Salmonella, Shigella, parasites like Entamoeba. You can even get viruses and other molds that can cause gastrointestinal infections and that can also make the food spoil pretty quickly. So we do have some steps to try to avoid that. We can do what's called surface pasteurization, and we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail later in this set of slides. And scientists are also working to genetically modify some of these crops in order to make them more resistant to these organisms that cause food to go bad or to spoil. Meat and poultry are also highly contaminated. Microbes from the gut, from feces, from the skin of the animal can contaminate the meat during slaughter. There are at least 70 known pathogens that we can find in meat and poultry. And this is often because the nutrition requirements for these animals are very similar to those of humans, so the microbes can thrive in both animals and people. We can see everything from abscesses to pneumonia to septic shock to toxic responses where the bacteria produces a toxin that makes you sick rather than the bacteria itself making you sick. Refrigerated meat can get moldy, so you have different species of mold. Of course, meat and poultry can be contaminated with bacteria. Some common ones include Pseudomonas, Clostridium, Salmonella, E. coli, right? All of those things that we've heard of before. And really what can happen here is that improper food handling, both at the butchering facility, through the distribution, and at the food service, the final food service location. All of those places are places where meat and poultry can get contaminated and therefore make you, the final customer, sick. The USDA in the US, the US Department of Agriculture, is responsible for examining carcasses to make sure that overall the carcass looks healthy, that there weren't big wounds and infections in the animal before it was butchered. So in theory, that should help. They try to examine facilities to make sure there's not a lot of fecal contamination. But if you've ever seen how animals are processed for meat, it's not a very pretty way to process animals, especially when we're talking about these big slaughterhouses. When you butcher your own animal for food, of course you often can take more care and avoid that kind of contamination, but the majority of us who buy our food and buy it at the grocery store, where they are, the animals have been prepared kind of in this mass production facility. Fish and shellfish also are known to be contaminated with various microbes. Fish and shellfish, especially shellfish that are filter feeders, they collect a lot of microorganisms in that filter mechanism. But some common bacterial infections that we can see in fish and shellfish include Salmonella, Vibrio, Clostridium. We also see some of the parasitic tapeworms in undercooked fish and shellfish. They can be contaminated also with toxins or heavy metals that are in the water. And there are some species of fish and shellfish that are known to, they call it bioaccumulation, where the organism basically collects and causes it to be amplified. So things like mercury. So there are different species of fish that you should avoid because they have high levels of mercury. And I think the Monterey Bay Aquarium publishes a list relatively frequently of the fish that are safe to eat, the fish that maybe are not as safe to eat, and the fish that you shouldn't eat. And they also talk about responsible fishing and things like that. Shrimp are generally just considered to be contaminated, so it's not recommended to consume raw shrimp. They should be cooked thoroughly. Any raw shellfish, so like mussels and clams and oysters, they are just assumed to be contaminated, so you shouldn't eat those raw either. The final type of food or beverage that we'll talk about that is often associated with contamination and foodborne illness is milk. Again, this is more common, in these big, massive dairies, but, it's important for the USDA to come in and do inspections of the herd to make sure that the dairies are sanitary. So you have all these cattle kind of just lined up here to be milked, and so this area can get contaminated with feces pretty quickly. Cows are not necessarily particular about where they're going to go to the bathroom. But one of the other things to worry about is that cows can often get infection in the udders. It's mastitis. It's very similar to a type of infection that breastfeeding women can get. So it's an infection basically in the mammary glands. And those organisms can contaminate the milk. So you have to be careful with that. Some of the common contaminants in milk: Pseudomonas, Streptococcus, Lactobacillus. There are standards set forth by the USDA about appropriate levels or acceptable levels of contamination in both raw and pasteurized milk. So raw milk is milk that has basically come straight from the cow. It has not been processed. You can buy it sometimes directly from local dairies or like at a farmer's market, or you can buy it at some of the specialty grocery stores like Sprouts or Whole Foods. Pasteurized, of course, is what most people drink. It has been treated through high heat to try to kill as many pathogenic microorganisms as possible. There's also a bacteria called Lactobacillus, and that is one that is responsible often for helping ferment milk products or dairy products so that we can get things like yogurts and cheeses. Now, when it comes to the specific types of infections that we can get from food, we can get what are called intoxications. So there's a difference between an intoxication and an infection. With an intoxication, it's not necessarily the bacteria itself that is making you sick. The bacteria is producing a toxin, and the toxin is what makes you sick. So some of the Staphylococcus species produce toxins that cause diarrhea and vomiting. Clostridium preferenges produces an enterotoxin that causes diarrhea and vomiting. This one is dangerous, Clostridium botulism, right? It produces a very potent neurotoxin that causes what we call a flaccid paralysis. Flaccid paralysis means your muscles will no longer contract, so you can no longer move your body. This becomes life-threatening when it affects the muscles that control your breathing, like your diaphragm. If you can no longer breathe, well, I think we know what happens. So Clostridium botulinum toxin is very, very dangerous. And then Bacillus cereus. This one is often associated with contaminated rice and other grains. The toxin acts as an emetic. It makes you throw up. Now, when we talk about infection, what we're talking about is a microorganism that has established itself inside of your body and is growing and replicating. It may also produce a toxin, but it can do other things as well. So really commonly, one organism that we see in contaminated, especially meat and especially poultry, is bacteria that belong to the Salmonella genus. There are lots and lots of organisms that fit under this category, and broadly they cause gastrointestinal issues, abdominal pain, and diarrhea generally. And this will be found in undercooked meat, definitely undercooked poultry, and undercooked eggs. This is why if you ever watch shows with Gordon Ramsay, he gets really mad when people don't cook their chicken all the way. It's raw! And he'll start screaming and cursing. And I mean, that's why you watch Gordon Ramsay, but this is a really dangerous infection. There's a specific variety of salmonella called Salmonella typhi that causes typhoid fever. And this one can be very dangerous in causing infection. And often, kind of counterintuitively, we actually don't see diarrhea, but we get severe infection in the intestines that goes into the bloodstream. It can last for weeks, it can be fatal, and it often spreads through populations, so it can be an epidemic. Another organism that we see contaminating, especially, again, meat, is Shigella. Shigella causes what we call dysentery. It's just a dangerous diarrhea spread by contaminated food and water, and it has a toxin called Shiga toxin that is also present in some types of E. coli. And this is one that's currently, it's an active outbreak in Washington. 72 people have infections, which is 7 times higher than what they normally see. Cholera, which we've talked about before, can also cause foodborne illness. It can be carried by copepods in the ocean. So if you happen to ingest water or food, like an animal that's eaten copepods, you can get cholera, severe nausea, pain, diarrhea, and that clear stool that comes because you've been passing liters of diarrhea a day. There are other Vibrio species that can also cause gastrointestinal illness, but generally it's a lot more mild than cholera. So it's still diarrhea, but it's not too bad. And again, we mostly see this in undercooked seafood, undercooked shellfish particularly. So here's this headline: oysters from Rhode Island recalled due to Vibrio outbreak. So symptoms include diarrhea, cramping, nausea, vomiting, headache, fever, and chills. And this is from August of this year. So again, maybe I am trying to scare you a little bit. I'm not trying to scare you too much away from eating food. You have to eat. And if you eat meat or fish or shellfish, that's fine. You just have to make sure that it's sourced responsibly, and that it's prepared appropriately. So, if your thing is to down raw oysters, you may want to reconsider that. We also have this broad category that's sometimes called traveler's diarrhea. This is usually associated with contaminated water from parts of the world that don't have the same sanitation infrastructure that we have in the US. It's not one particular bacterium that causes it. Most often it's E. coli, but it can be other fecal bacteria as well. And it can cause anything from like a mild to a severe diarrhea. This is why when you go certain places, they might tell you, don't drink the water here, only use bottled water, make sure their ice is made with filtered water. We recently traveled to Cancun, and they say the same thing. There are parts, don't drink the tap water from the hotel, but they provide you filtered water. There's bottled water everywhere. Everybody makes their ice with filtered water. No problem. We had no problem. Just don't suck the water out of the tap. Otherwise, you're going to be fine. But there are some types of E. coli, especially this one, E. coli O157H7, and you've read about a dangerous type of E. coli already, that can cause what we call enterohemorrhagic colitis. And if we break that down, intestines, bleeding, colon, bloody diarrhea. And that's associated with fecal contamination in meat, but also in produce. There was an outbreak in 2009, I believe, associated with spinach. And what had happened was there's this field in Salinas where they grow spinach, and I believe it was wild pigs go through the field, defecate, and as the water gets into the field, the feces breaks down, gets into the soil. So the bacteria that were in the feces get into the soil. And then as plants do, the spinach, uptakes the water from the soil. Well, the water from the soil was contaminated with this E. coli. And so the E. coli bacteria was actually in the vasculature, like the plant veins. And a lot of people enjoy raw spinach, myself included. I like to have a nice spinach salad. In fact, cooked spinach, the texture kind of weirds me out. I'm not a huge fan. Well, I would have been at significant risk for infection if I don't cook my spinach. I can wash the outside all I want, but the bacteria are growing on the inside. And a group from UC Davis showed that really the only way to get rid of the bacteria from the inside, if you didn't want to cook it, if you cook it, you're fine. If you wanted to eat it raw, you had to actually soak the leaves in bleach. So the bleach would go into the plant vasculature and kill the bacteria. And of course, you're not going to eat spinach that's been soaked in bleach. So it's important to be aware of what the risks are and to kind of just keep up to date when they're starting to say that there are food recalls, and just make sure that you don't buy that food. Listeria is another organism that contaminates dairy products and produce as well. It affects the central nervous system, so it can cause meningitis. It can also cause gastrointestinal symptoms. So I thought that, I know it's not like funny, but it is kind of funny. Another reason to avoid gas station burritos, 24,000 are under recall because they may have listeria. So one of the dangerous things about this bacterium in particular is that it grows really well in the cold. Oftentimes, you'll put your food in the refrigerator, and when you put it in the refrigerator and store it there, that keeps microorganisms from growing. This one is like, oh, refrigerator, this is fine, and it continues to grow really well. So there have even been issues with listeria contamination in ice cream. But the big outbreak that was dangerous a few years ago was in cantaloupe, and that ended up costing the company like millions of dollars. But when you think of a cantaloupe, generally what people do, it has that really thick rind, right? You don't eat that. So sometimes people don't wash it. They just take their knife, they cut into the cantaloupe, and they slice off the piece of cantaloupe they want to eat. So you eat the flesh, which should not be contaminated. But remember, if you haven't washed the cantaloupe, as you drag that knife in through the fruit, you're bringing in potential contaminants from the rind of the fruit. And then you put it in the refrigerator so you can store it for later. And if it's contaminated with listeria, that bacteria is just going to keep growing. So, long story short, wash your cantaloupe. Our last bacteria that we'll talk about, Campylobacter. This is actually one of the most common foodborne bacterial diseases, even though a lot of people haven't heard about it. It's also one of the more dangerous foodborne bacterial diseases. It does cause a lot of diarrhea. And here's a headline from earlier this year: drinking raw milk linked to a Campylobacter outbreak. At least 14 are sick in Utah. I'm a big fan of, as long as what you're doing isn't hurting anybody, I think it's fine to do whatever you want to do. So if you want to drink raw milk, drink raw milk. Will I shake my head a little bit and wonder why you're drinking raw milk? Yeah, probably. The only time I've ever been upset about somebody and raw milk was when I went to Sprouts once and they had a sign that was like, oh, raw milk, it's the next best thing to mother's milk. Basically implying that you could feed infants raw milk, which is totally unacceptable because, as you can see, it is often contaminated with bacteria, and adult stomachs can usually handle that, but little baby stomachs, their stomach acid isn't strong enough to destroy all this bacteria, so it's not safe to give to infants. And then on the sign it also said, oh, it has white blood cells, and I'm like, that's nasty, because that's generally implying that there's pus in there. So yeah, don't feed your infants raw milk. Then I will definitely judge you because you're hurting somebody else. If you want to drink raw milk on your own, enjoy your Campylobacter. And then finally, we can talk about Yersiniosis very quickly. We've talked about Yersinia already in the context of the Black Plague, Yersinia pestis. But there's another species called Yersinia enterocolitica, which causes gastrointestinal issues, and it can be severe. And so, of course, up here I was throwing shade at people who drink raw milk, but pasteurized milk isn't necessarily safe either. The idea behind pasteurization is not that you're going to sterilize milk. Milk is not sterile. There is a USDA acceptable level of bacterial contamination in your milk. So it is there. There is contamination. But if the pasteurization process isn't done appropriately, you can still get things that sneak through. So pasteurization is really important, but if it isn't done right, you can still end up with a lot of contamination.